Hey there. If you enjoyed this content, please hit that subscribe button, give us a like, and drop a comment below to let us know your thoughts. Your support helps our channel grow, and we truly appreciate it. Thanks for being a part of our community. It was the winter of 1998, in a small town nestled deep within the woods of Maine. The historic inn at Whispering Pines had stood for over a century. Its weathered bricks and towering spires had seen countless guests. But there was one room that had its own story, room 309. Madeline, a writer looking for some solitude and inspiration, decided to stay at the inn for a week. On checking in, the innkeeper, Mrs. Esther, handed her the keys to room 309. As she did, her hand trembled slightly. "It's quiet this time of year," Esther said, avoiding eye contact. "You'll have the whole floor to yourself." Madeline thought nothing of it. That night, as she settled into bed, she was surrounded by an eerie silence, punctuated only by the distant sounds of the woods. It was comforting, and she drifted to sleep with ease. But, a few hours later, she was jolted awake by the distinct sound of footsteps. They were soft, measured, and seemed to come from the hallway. Assuming it was Mrs. Esther or another guest, she turned over and tried to go back to sleep. But then, she heard the footsteps enter her room. Frozen in fear, she pulled the covers over her head and tried to remain as still as possible. For what felt like hours, she heard the footsteps pace around her room, occasionally stopping near her bed. But when dawn broke, they abruptly ceased, and Madeline finally mustered the courage to look around. To her relief, no one was there. The room was exactly as she left it. At breakfast, Madeline tried to casually ask Mrs. Esther about other guests. "Oh dear, you're the only one on that floor," Esther replied, clearly disturbed. Madeline hesitated, then shared her experience. Mrs. Esther paled, and then beckoned her into the living room, away from prying ears. Years ago, in room 309, there had been a tragedy. A man named Charles had stayed there, waiting for his lover, Eleanor, to join him. But Eleanor never arrived, and in his despair, Charles took his own life in that very room. Since then, guests had reported hearing footsteps, especially on nights when the inn was quiet. Madeline, though shaken, decided to stay another night, determined not to be driven away by an old ghost story. That night she set up a tape recorder, hoping to capture the mysterious footsteps. But when she woke the next morning, the tape was missing. Panicking, she searched the room and finally found it outside her door, along with a single dried rose. Rushing downstairs, she played the tape for Mrs. Esther. What they heard sent shivers down their spines. Among the static, the footsteps were clearly audible. But more disturbingly, there was a soft, sorrowful whisper. "Eleanor, why didn't you come?" Madeline checked out that very day, and room 309? Mrs. Esther never rented it out again. It remains locked to this day, a silent tribute to a love that ended too soon, and footsteps that continue to search for an answer. After Madeline's chilling encounter, whispers of the haunted room 309 spread across town. Many dismissed it as lore, but a few believed. Among the believers was a young historian named Jacob, who was visiting town for his research on its early settlers. Fascinated by Madeline's account, he approached Mrs. Esther, requesting to stay in room 309 for a night. Esther hesitated but saw a genuine interest in Jacob's eyes. She handed him the key with a warning. "If it gets too much, leave. Some spirits aren't to be trifled with." Taking all necessary precautions, Jacob entered the room with an array of equipment: cameras, EVP recorders, and a book of local folklore. Night descended, and the room grew cold. As the witching hour approached, the footsteps Madalena described echoed through the room. Unlike Madeline, Jacob was prepared and excitedly started recording. Hours seemed to pass with just footsteps, but as dawn neared, Jacob's camera caught something astounding: a faint apparition of a man looking distraught. This was clearly Charles, endlessly pacing in his anguish. but surprisingly, there was more. A figure of a woman also appeared, standing by the window, looking out as if waiting for someone. Word of Jacob's findings spread like wildfire, and the inn became a hot spot for paranormal enthusiasts. But it also caught the attention of Clara, an elderly woman from a neighboring town. Clara claimed to be the granddaughter of Eleanor, the woman for whom Charles waited in vain. She revealed a letter, yellowed with age, that her grandmother had written but never sent. It was addressed to Charles. Eleanor had intended to meet him that fateful night, but her journey was thwarted by a terrible storm. When she finally reached the town the next day, she was met with the tragic news of Charles's demise. Devastated, Eleanor left town, never to return, bearing the weight of that unsent letter and a broken heart. Clara believed that her grandmother's spirit might be the female apparition in the room, forever waiting for a reunion that would never come. Feeling a responsibility to put the two spirits to rest, Clara, with Jacob's assistance, arranged a night where they would try to communicate with the spirits. Using a combination of old rituals and modern techniques, they reached out. The atmosphere grew tense and the room's temperature dropped noticeably. A ghostly wind blew, rustling the old curtains. Then, on the EVP recorder, they heard Charles's voice. "Eleanor, is that you?" Followed by a soft, mournful response. "I tried. I'm so sorry." Clara held out the unsent letter, whispering words of love and peace, urging both spirits to find solace in the truth. Hours passed, and as dawn approached, a bright orb of light appeared, hovering in the middle of the room. Within the orb, silhouettes of Charles and Eleanor seemed to embrace, and as the first ray of sunlight streamed into the room, the orb dissipated. The room felt different, warmer, and at peace. From that day on, no guest ever reported hearing footsteps in room 309. The restless spirits of Charles and Eleanor had finally found their peace. Mrs. Esther, moved by the events, decided to convert room 309 into a memorial of sorts, a testament to the enduring power of love. Clara, her heart lighter, left a copy of Eleanor's letter there, allowing visitors to partake in the tragic tale of love lost and found. Jacob documented the entire event, and it became the centerpiece of his research. He stayed in the town, forging a deep bond with its people and its stories. And as for the inn at Whispering Pines, it thrived, not just as a testament to the paranormal, but as a beacon of hope and love, reminding everyone of the ties that bind us, even in death. Years later, on a quiet winter night, if one listens closely instead of the sound of restless footsteps, one might hear a soft melody echoing through the halls, a song of love, reconciliation, and eternity.